Now you can hear me?
Can hear you, yeah.
Okay.
I see Antoinette stepped out for the moment. She may have been having audio difficulties. I don't have a member of my executive committee to address, so I'll just address all the board members. I am starting the webinar now because it's 6:30.
Having a hard time hearing.
So hopefully we will start to see some attendees joining us as well. And hopefully Antoinette's able to sign back in. I don't see our presenter here yet either.
Okay, I guess I'm signing out.
Doris, we could hear you. Okay, I guess she couldn't hear us. So again, committee members, thank you for joining us. Antoinette was here. I think she was having audio problems and signed out. Hopefully she will be back in a moment. But our presenter isn't here yet, so please hang on.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you, Antoinette.
All right. Sorry about that. I had some issues logging in. I had to restart my computer. So we have a presenter that's going to be joining us, but she just sent an email. She's having trouble logging in. So just give me a moment. I'm going to resend her the link. Jeremy, would you like to go ahead with roll call?
Sure. Let me quickly call you before I give the instructions. Antoinette Martinez. She didn't hear me. Okay. We'll get back to Antoinette. So welcome, everybody. This is the Housing Committee. I am going to mute everybody. And when I am called the names of the committee members, when I call your name, please unmute yourself, acknowledge your name, and then mute yourself again. If you are a board member but not a committee member, like Damian Andrade, one of our new board members, in case you don't know him yet, I'm going to write your name down, but I'm not going to call you because you're not a committee member yet. So we will start. Antoinette, can you hear me? Antoinette Martinez? We'll get back to her. I'm pretty sure she's here. Alberto Ortiz Almeida?
Present.
Thank you. Joan Body? Joan Body? Gladys Bruno? Gladys Bruno? John Fontillis? John Fontillis? Leonette Lopez?
Present.
Thank you. John Johnston? John Johnston? Marilyn Melman? Marilyn Melman? Maria Roca? Maria Roca? John Santori?
I am present.
Thank you. Elise Shook?
Present.
Thank you. Antoinette Martinez?
Present.
Thank you. Roll has been called.
All right, thank you so much, Jeremy. I'm just pulling up a slide deck that I put together for today's meeting. I sent the presenter the link. I'm just gonna check to see if they joined in as a, we'll just need to promote them to panelist.
Oh, Antoinette, I have to make you co-host. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
You are. You can do all of that too. We have a couple of attendees now. I see a presenter. Let me see if I can promote her. Okay, I was able to promote her.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Hey everyone, good evening.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us. Just give me 1 second. I just need one moment to pull up the slide deck. Sorry about that. All right, I'll work on pulling that up so you all can see the agenda for tonight's meeting. And again, I apologize. I had some tech issues with logging in before the meeting. So a couple of months ago, we all met and we talked about some meeting topics that we would like to hold for this coming year. And one of those topics was talking about the financing of social housing. So we're really excited to have with us today Oksana, and she's going to be talking more about the financing of social housing. I have additional items that we're going to be talking about at the end of the meeting, some new business items that were sent over from committee member John Santori. If anybody else has any topics that they would like to discuss after the presentation, just send me a message in the chat and I'll add them to the list of topics for us to have. So again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm not sure if you have a slide deck to share, but do you see at the bottom of your screen a share option? If you do.
I have to make you co-host for you to be able to use that. Hang on one moment.
Thank you, Jeremy.
No problem. Oksana, you should be able to share your screen now.
Great, thank you. So just give me 1 second. Let me bring up my slides. Are my slides visible to you all?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Okay, great. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak to you all and for having me in your meeting. My name is Oksana Mironova, and I am a senior policy analyst at the Community Service Society of New York. We are a 175-year-old nonprofit that works on anti-poverty issues in the city. And my role within the organization is to work on housing policy issues. And I'm here because myself and a couple of other co-authors published this report about a little under a year ago called Pathways to Social Housing. And I will talk a little bit about what's in the report. I'll, before that, give you all an overview of what the housing market looks like in the city. And I know that you all are particularly interested in social housing finance. So we can dive deeper into that during the presentation and also during the question and answer portion. I think my presentation will take about 10 minutes and then we could spend the rest of the time talking. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have. Before we talk about social housing, just to contextualize that part of our housing landscape in what exists in New York City today. We have about 3 point, like a little bit over 3 million housing units in the city. Way more rentals than homeowners. This is unlike most other places in the US, but at the same time is similar to other major large cities in the world. Yeah, pretty unique to the US, not at all unique to everywhere else. Among the renter occupied units in the city, about half are rent regulated, which means that the rents in those units can't go up as much as the owner may want. They're controlled, the rent increases are decided upon by something called the Rent Guidelines Board. And this rent regulation comes from a state law that has been in place in one way or another since the 20s, and its current iteration since the 70s. That's about 1 million units. Then we have about the same number of market rentals. In those units, tenants generally don't have that many protections from rent increases and are also not guaranteed the right to a lease renewal either. So there's not much stability there. We have 175,000 units of public housing. That public housing is very much a type of social housing. And I'll get a little bit more into that later. And this is the largest stock of public housing anywhere in the US. And 60,000 subsidized rentals. So these are different types of affordable housing that are supported by the government in some way. And I see some questions in the chat. So I could share this presentation with you all after. Then there's about 1 million owner-occupied units, and 347,000 are co-ops and condos. 60,000, in addition to that, are limited equity co-ops, and that is also a form of social housing. So maybe you all have heard of Mitchell-Lama. So that program produced limited equity co-ops where you can't sell the unit on the open market and it stays affordable, usually for about 40 to 50 years. And I live in the Mitchell-Lama in Washington Heights. And then the balance are single family owner occupied units. So in terms of social housing, 60,000 owner occupied units that are sort of social housing, about 60,000 rentals, and then 175,000 public housing units. So our housing market today is very much predicated on housing speculation. And the result of that has been ever rising rents, especially in the last 25 to 30 years, and harassment and over-leveraging as a business practice among investors. The more expensive property becomes, the more and more we see of this. And that ends in mass displacement, especially if people who are more vulnerable and face more risk within the housing market, specifically people of color and low-income people. And the material results of all of this have been the loss of subsidized and rent stabilized units over time. So for rent stabilized units, we lost 291,000 of these units in New York City over the course of about 20 years. And my organization and other organizations that we work with really believe that social housing is an alternative to speculation and really an alternative way of looking at the housing market. And we define social housing as social housing exists very much in a continuum. So it's not one specific type of housing tenure. So Mitchell-Lama units are social housing, public housing units are social housing. It's kind of like a really big umbrella term. And usually we talk about social housing as meeting three different types of metrics, basically. The first one is decommodification, and that means protection from speculation in some way. This could mean keeping housing affordable in perpetuity, such as with public housing. It could mean a 99-year lease that's renewable, such as with a community land trust. But basically protection from speculation. Then a measure of social equality, meaning that there is some form of income and racial integration within the housing that we're talking about. And finally, a measure of resident control, meaning that residents are able to decide what happens with the property. As a tenant, you don't have any decision about what happens to your building, for example. As a homeowner, you have a lot of control over what happens in the building, but at the same time, housing, single-family homeownership is highly commodified, so it meets the resident control metric, but not the decommodification metric. And in the US, like I mentioned, the biggest forms of social housing are public housing, so NYCHA, limited equity cooperatives, so that's Mitchell-Lamas or HDFCs, but basically the type of ownership where there's some form of subsidy attached to it, and where the building or the unit can't be speculated on the open market. And finally, community land trusts, and this is the type of housing where the land is separated from the housing in some way, and there is a permanent steward over the land that prevents speculation. The oldest and most successful community land trust in the city is the Cooper Square Community Land Trust on the Lower East Side. And this is a little matrix that we developed for talking about social housing. Like I said, it's very much something that is on a continuum. Some forms of social housing in the US are highly decommodified. So if you take something like public housing, you can't sell a public housing building without privatizing it. But at the same time, because of the historic relationship between the city and the state and public housing authorities that are highly racialized, public housing tenants don't have much control over what happens in those buildings, and they're often stigmatized and criminalized as well. Yeah, there's none of the models that we have that currently exist, because they exist within our market system, perfectly meet every single metric, but at the same time, it's kind of like the reality of implementing any kind of a housing system where some things will always need to be improved. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the report that I mentioned, and then we'll also provide a link to that in the chat. So this is a report that we published about a year ago, where we outline 20 different policies that are in the works in some way on the city or state level that will bring us closer to a bigger social housing sector. The first, and they're divided into 4 parts. And the first part is policies that promote democratic control of housing in some way. And that includes everything from thinking about the way that the city disposes of its public land and buildings that are no longer used, and encouraging the city to make sure that those are nonprofits and other types of socially oriented developers get first bid on those properties. Then it also includes the transformation of land banks, which is a little bit more relevant to upstate than the city. We don't currently have a land bank, but there is a bill in the city council to bring one to the city. Then the Tenant and Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, and this relates to affordable housing, social housing finance. So the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, there's a bill in the state legislature to bring it about right now, and it would give tenants the opportunity to buy their buildings when they go up for sale. The legal framework is really important because it gives tenants the mechanism to interfere in a property transaction, giving them more power over what happens with their property. But the only way that this is able to function in a high cost market like ours is if the city is able to provide financing, the city or the state is able to provide financing that goes along with this law and this right. So one of the main ways of financing social housing is getting the city to either give you land or to provide cover acquisition costs in some way. This section of the report also includes the acquisition of distressed debt also. And this is something that has been in the news lately because of the failure of the Signature Bank, which is a pretty a bank that financed a lot of unscrupulous landlords. And I could talk a little bit more about that if y'all are interested. So please bring that up in the question and answer portion. The second part of the report focuses on financial resources for housing, housing justice and social housing. And the first recommendation is to fund preservation purchases, and that's basically to get the city or the state government to provide financing for preservation of buildings within the housing, but within the open market that are being neglected or not taken care of by a private landlord. Then the second really important, so in addition to acquisition, all housing requires operating subsidies. And we believe that housing vouchers are a way to finance the long-term operations of social housing. But in order for that to really work, HPD and other housing agencies would have to direct housing vouchers to social housing specifically, which they sort of do. HPD has a pot of vouchers that they use to finance affordable housing development. So it's a practice that exists that could be tweaked, basically. Then different types of finance agencies supporting social housing infrastructure. So there are community-oriented finance organizations like CDFIs or credit unions, which are exist within the realm of finance, but are either because of because they're publicly chartered or because of their mission are really oriented towards basically public works and the public good. And there's an opportunity there for more affordable housing and social housing finance coming from those specific institutions. Then the other thing that we include here is funding housing organizing, which is a little bit kind of removed from direct social housing finance, but supports it nonetheless, because in order to win large scale change within the housing system, we do need much more organizing in the city. So funding housing organizing kind of is a step towards more social housing. And finally, progressive taxation. So changes to the way that we evaluate land in general, and the way that we evaluate affordable housing transactions could both curb speculation, so curb the type of practices that lead to displacement that are coming from the investors and from banks, and also would in the short term, raise revenue for more affordable and social housing production. Part 3 focuses on tenants' rights and protections, and includes everything from good cause eviction protection to right to counsel, and to protection of the rent law changes that happened in 2019. And our thinking here is that even though this doesn't directly lead to like the construction of a social housing building or the preservation of a social housing building, all of these actions cool the housing market by preventing speculation. With stricter rent regulation, with good cause eviction protections, the type of financing that is preferred by speculative landlords becomes much more difficult to obtain, because you can no longer speculate on raising the rent by like 10 and 15% every single year if rents are regulated. Therefore, the property is no longer possible to overvalue any particular building. So the type of laws that promote tenants' rights and promote tenant protections are also a way to make social housing production down the line much more possible. And finally, part 4 focuses on code enforcement and tools for safe conditions in buildings. And here we talk about the expansion of proactive enforcement by the Department of Buildings and HPD, greater housing code standards across the state, and broader financial penalties for hazardous conditions. And similarly to the tenant protection section of this report, the enactment of stricter code enforcement makes it much more difficult for landlords to let their buildings decline before selling them, which is a really, really common practice, especially in gentrifying neighborhoods. By making it more difficult to milk a building, again, it is the type of speculative finance that defines our housing system today becomes much more difficult. And again, this is a sort of a precursor to greater social housing development. And our final kind of like our call to action from this report really encourages readers to organize with their neighbors, to join housing organizations. So the civic involvement and community boards obviously is a part of this as well. And we go a little bit into the history of social housing in the city as well. So that's the end of my slides, and I will drop a link to this report into the chat, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all have.
Thank you so much. If anyone has a question, raise your hand and we'll go through the list.
Antoinette, you sound very distant. I'm not sure anybody heard that very well. Antoinette? Well, I believe she said if anybody has any questions or comments, please raise your hand. I have John Santori first.
Can I just defer to board members or anyone else who's on the board? I would like to wait to see if anybody else wants to
There's another
speak.
hand up right now. Thank you, John. I will call on Jeremy Kaplan then.
Hey, thank you so much. This presentation was really great. My question is around sort of the position of Eric Adams was actually just around Sunset Park today and trying to promote bringing back 421A. And curious sort of your stance on that as those subsidies and just the sense of why it is that we spend so much time sort of subsidizing these developers. The 421A, by the way, for a lot of people is just is tax breaks, 30-year tax breaks for developers if they put in quote affordable housing. But I'm curious to sort of hear through your data, Oksana, if you've seen sort of what is the actual outcome and how much more effective is other alternatives to social housing, and the various different models for actually creating real affordable housing.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. We have been working on stopping 421A for quite some time. We have research going back to like, I think the Koch years, which is when 421A was introduced. And my colleagues at CSS published a couple of really good reports last year when the 421A fight was more live, because 421A expired last year. So it is our most expensive expenditure as related to real estate. I think I'm pretty sure that this is the right number. So I'm going to say it, but I could be wrong, and I will look it up after I stop talking. But I think we're somewhere at $1.7 billion a year, which is an insane amount of money. And the way that 421A works is that it this is a tax break that started in the 80s, or actually, sorry, started in like the mid 70s to encourage any kind of a development in the city, because the city leaders were freaking out about the fact that we were in the city just went into default, construction stopped. So they were like, please, we will give you this a tax, like a very sizable tax break where you're not going to have to pay taxes for initially, I think it was like 15 years on a good portion of the development if you build something. And then because it works, it's so profitable, it has kind of gotten rolled over a bunch of times. Under Cuomo, it got renamed like Affordable New York or something like that. It produces almost no affordable housing, and the affordable housing that it produces is at like 125% AMI, so the rents are quite high. And there's been a lot of conversations about whether or not it's worth reforming it, but in addition to the fact that it costs like an insane amount of money to the city, which could be used for like, it could be used for social housing, it could also be used for like schools, libraries, whatever. There's like way better uses for this foregone revenue, basically, than just subsidizing luxury development. In addition to all of that, because of the way that it valuates land, it ends up pushing the cost of land up. So the overall effect on the market, because landlords, or rather developers, are able to factor in the fact that they're not going to have to pay taxes on these properties over the course of a long time, like over the course of like usually like 15 to 20 years. It ends up making the cost of buying or renting in the city much more expensive. So it has a negative overall impact on the cost of rentals in the city as well. So yeah, I mean, we're definitely happy that 421A didn't get renewed last year, and are hopeful that we will continue on not subsidizing luxury development in the city.
Thank you. I have Ryan Smith next.
Hi. So one general question I think has to do with land trusts. I'm familiar with them in the way that they work in other states. Brother of mine lives in Amherst, Massachusetts, and they've been able to protect land and work as communities in a really beautiful way. I'm very curious how a land trust works in New York City, and if you see it expanding. I know you had one example of Cooper Union, but also in one of your slides there was something to do with land trusts or land trust banks. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So there is a lot of excitement among community development corporations and durations and tenant organizations in the city around CLTs. And that's because it kind of like hits a bunch of different points where it's not like, it opens up a conversation for people where you're no longer just talking about affordability, but talking about the autonomy that people have in their living spaces. Because CLTs are set up in a way where if a CLT covers a bunch of buildings and exists in the neighborhood, it's able to really influence the way that things happen in a particular place. So there's a great CLT in Boston called Dudley Square, and they were able to under kind of like launch this really beautiful community planning process, and in addition to keeping properties affordable, really change the way that decision making happens and empower people. Despite the fact that there's a lot of excitement about CLTs, there's only like, there's one that has been around since the 80s. That's the Cooper Square one. And then there are a bunch of others that are like formed but don't have any land. And the way that Cooper Square works is that it got a bunch of properties from the city when there was a bunch of tax foreclosed buildings on the Lower East Side. And the city sold the majority of them off to private developers, but there was a piece that because there are a couple of blocks that were really organized, they were able to claw back some of those properties and to keep them affordable. So yeah, the kind of like, I feel like there's like an implicit question within your question about like how does, you know, like in the city's expensive as ours, it's a really difficult thing where unless you're getting the property from the city or getting something that's tax foreclosed or foreclosed by a bank and getting where like it's taken over by a finance institution and then given to the city, it's really difficult to actually obtain. So that's the trouble that a lot of the newer CLTs are running into.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. I have John Santori next.
Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. I had a couple of questions. So not to get too broad, I'm sorry, I don't know a lot about this issue, so my questions are going to be overly broad, but can you talk a little bit about the Community Service Society's overall orientation on this issue in terms of its relationship to for-profit housing? I mean, you know, I take away from your presentation that the Community Service Society feels that for-profit market housing is not a good thing, for lack of a better word, that it doesn't produce affordable housing for working people or lower income people. Is that broadly correct? Is there any role in the Community Service Society's vision for more market private housing development in a community like Sunset Park?
Well, so CSS, we are an anti-poverty organization, and our mission, which goes back to a really like a charter in like 1875, really focuses on low-income people, which we define as people who earn under 200% of the federal poverty line. So the work that we do focuses on everything from housing to criminal justice to healthcare. And if you look at that demographic of people there, it's almost like if you're not already living in a unit that exists, if you're looking for housing on the open market, it's almost impossible to get into an apartment that is not regulated and not subsidized in some way. So yeah, like our mission is very much focused on housing that would benefit people who are under 200% of the federal poverty line. And at this point in time, that is either subsidized housing or housing that's regulated. So our purview is rent regulation, tenants' rights, and affordable housing.
So as a follow-up to that, and I think this would follow up. 2 years ago, if I'm forgetting exactly when, Sunset Park had its first mandatory inclusionary housing proposal, a property at 737 4th Avenue. And that was, to my knowledge, 75% market and 25% affordable. The affordability was I think is pretty low on the units, somewhere between like 50 and 60% of AMI. I can't remember the exact numbers, but 75% market. The board approved it in a split vote. The council person approved it. Does CSS think that this board and this community should be considering further mandatory inclusionary housing projects, or should it be a hard no on all of them, or is it worth negotiating with developers? Can that be a tool that can build housing here?
So with individual developments, I've been watching the way that things have changed from Bloomberg to de Blasio to what's happening now. And it seems like with like what happened in Queens around Innovation Queens, I think it was Julie Wan is the council member there, or Tiffany Caban's like complicated negotiation with the developers in Astoria. I would say that you should use all the tools that are available to get as much affordability as possible. Long term, I think that there's better things to focus, like better tools to focus on to produce affordability. But at the same time, a community board's purview is going to be to use the tools that you all have. There could be organizing for stuff that happens later. And it seems like it's now possible to get more than 25% affordability. Innovation Queens, I think, got 50. So like, whether you start with a hard no and get to 50%, or you start with a hard no and you get to 70%, like whatever. But I think that there needs to be like a pretty big fight before you get to something that's good, unfortunately. I don't think that's efficient. I don't think it should be up to a community to fight for every single development, because it just like people don't have time. It doesn't make sense. But at the same time, that's the system that we have. So I think it's kind of like being smart about negotiating inside and outside. And that's kind of like my opinion about the way that negotiations works, as opposed to like how CSS feels about MIH.
Thank you. I just saw the district manager, Jeremy. He put something in the chat that I'm unfamiliar with. But he sent it to me. Well, I can communicate with him later. Jeremy, if you have information on that development and the breakdown of affordability, if you have it and you're able to share it during this meeting, I think that would be great. Otherwise,
I certainly don't have it on my computer. I'm sure I have it in a file at the office, but I believe your numbers were off, John.
Do you mind if I read what you put in the chat?
Yeah, please feel free. But that was my memory of it, so please don't take that as absolute.
Okay, Jeremy wrote that I believe it was 40% of the units and got as low as 30% AMI. So I think he's saying 40% of the units are affordable, and those affordable units got as low as 30% AMI. So hopefully we can follow up on that. If I'm wrong, I apologize. I remember 25, 75, but I could certainly be wrong. So if I could just ask one more question to Oksana, what do you think we should be doing as community members? What kind of tangible action should we be taking? Because it seems like some of the things that your report talks about are legislative approaches, and others might be more organizing and on the ground. Something that I'm interested in and that I've started working with other people is walking through the community and writing down properties that are either vacant or abandoned or seem to be in disrepair, and trying to see if we can imagine them becoming land trusts. Just to get that conversation started. So are there is there a list of things to do for people who care about producing more affordable housing and preserving affordable housing in the community?
Yeah, so we have a list at the end of the report, which I put in the chat. I would say that it's kind of because things are so bad, there's a lot of space to do lots of different things. I always feel that starting with organizing is kind of like the most effective thing. So just talking to your neighbors. If you live in a regulated building, I see that Hennessy's is on this, maybe on the community board, but like organizations like Tenants and Neighbors and Met Council are an amazing resource where people could plug in to both figure out what's going on in their particular buildings, but also to figure out how to push for collective change on the city and state level. At the same time, electoral change is not for everyone, and that's totally fine. So doing like what you described, where you're looking at the vacancies in your neighborhood and figuring out if any of them are owned either by the city or the state or by large institutions that would be susceptible to public pressure is another path where like if a big university or a hospital system, I don't think that there's any land like that in Sunset Park, but if there's ways, if there's land that you want access to, figuring out who owns it first is like the first step, and then going from there.
Thank you. I'll turn it back over to the meeting. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. And thank you, John. And John, I wasn't sure of my numbers either, which is why I just sent it to you rather than the entire world, but now it's out there.
I'm sorry, Jeremy. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just wanted, because if I'm wrong, then I wanted to correct the record if I'm wrong.
I am uncertain of my numbers, but that is what I remember, but I can't recall specifically.
Okay.
So I've run out
That's
of.
fine. We can confirm and circulate the correct numbers after the meeting. But thank you both for jogging your memories. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Members of the public, if you'd like to ask questions, attendees, please raise your hand now and we'll call on you in order. Members of the public, going once, going twice. I have Eduardo Jimenez. Eduardo, you can unmute yourself.
Hello. Hi. Making sure you guys can hear me.
Yep.
Are we good? Okay, good. So thank you for the information provided tonight. Much appreciated. I'm basically a community member concerned about affordable housing in my community and lack of as well. And then this question might not necessarily be directed to Oksana, right? And then maybe perhaps directed to CB7. So community boards have the potential to build community power. It's able to reflect the community needs. It's able to reflect, I think the larger opinion of what the community wants or what the community finds affordable in the community. And so then I think as to what John Santori might have touched based on, 2 years ago, there was a rezoning proposal where CB7 members were very much in support of, and then there seemed to be sort of like, I guess they were incentivized by the proposal of the developer. And then there were there was much community outcry in regards to like what the proposal might potentially set precedents in regards to like what affordable housing actually means in the community. And so then I'm wondering, with this information that was provided, as well as the information that was provided in the last meeting regarding CLTs and the creation thereof, how does this change the perspective of the community board when they are then later sort of like being approached by proposals from for-profit development? And so then I think that that's sort of like a thing that I'll just leave it out there so that we can all sort of like think and reflect on as community members and also as community board representatives of this community. And so once again, thank you, Oksana, for the information. And then I think maybe one of the questions I would like to ask is, how is this information accessible to, community members as civilians versus nonprofits versus community board, right? Community boards, and then I think how can a small group of civic participants sort of like begin advocating and using these tools as a component in how they can further build actual affordable housing in the community. So thank you once again, and I will give up my time. Thank you.
So I feel like there's one question that's more to the members of the board, and then there's another question for me. So do you want me to answer my question, the part of the question that's to me first?
Sure, why don't you go ahead and give it a shot?
Yeah. So in terms of the question of how does a small group of community members try to start to advocate, I think that there's a couple of ways, and it really really depends on your context. If you live in a rent-regulated building, I think organizing a tenants association with the help of tenants and neighbors, or the Met Council or a local CDC in your neighborhood is sort of like structurally the easiest thing to do, because there is the supports that exist in kind of like the landscape of New York City and housing in New York City. And if you're interested in kind of like the electoral side of things, you can then join something like Housing Justice for All or the Right to Counsel Coalition to influence what happens on the state or the city level. If you're less interested in electoral things and are kind of more interested in doing stuff within the community, I think talking to your neighbors and deciding what you want, and if there's vacant land you want to target, if there's like a really bad developer that is looking to build things in your neighborhood, or a really bad landlord that has a portfolio in your neighborhood, targeting them through public pressure and protest is kind of like the other side of the way to go about it. But yeah, there's like making a decision with your neighbors about what the collective change you want to see and what the tactics are that you want to use in order to get there is kind of like a decision that you have to make. And all of the stuff that I'm talking about, all of the resources that we do research and policy analysis, all of it is available on our website. And if you want to email me, I will put my email in the chat. And this is open to everyone if you want like more information, or if there's a way that I could provide any other data or anything that you need, please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to help if I can.
Thank you. I have Elise Shook next.
This is a very helpful presentation, so thank you so much. I had a question regarding if you're familiar with any consolidated resources that would provide information about property that is at risk for being foreclosed. Like, I would be very curious to know if something is, does anyone track the information? Is there like a public resource that is available for that?
Yes, I will also put that in the chat. So because of there's a federal law from the 70s that came out of like organizing that was done by tenants and low-income homeowners in Chicago, and kind of like a post whatever. This is like a lot of context that probably no one cares about besides me. So I'm gonna stop with the history lesson. And yeah, so there's a public database that's really difficult to interact with, but luckily there's an organization called NHD, the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development, that has this great resource called the DAP portal. I think it's like Displacement Index or something like that. And they give a bunch of different variables about kind of distrust in the neighborhood. And I think that foreclosure is one of those variables. So I think, I don't remember how low of geography it goes down to, because you get into like privacy issues. But you're able to see at least on quite a local level about where there are foreclosure hotspots. And I will put that in the chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the attendees did a quick fact check on me, and I guess John as well, and said New York YIMBY has a record that says 25% of the units at 737 4th Avenue are considered affordable, and it gets down as low as 46% of AMI. Again, that's according to New York YIMBY. I see no additional hands up at this point, so I'll say last call for this presenter. If anybody wishes to raise their hand, going once, going twice.
I think Maria has her hand up.
Her hand just went up. Thank you, John. I see Maria Roca is next. Maria, you could unmute yourself. Maria Roca.
Okay. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
We can hear you.
Oh, very good. Thank you so much. So I have for the presenter, and thank you for your knowledge of history of all of these programs and movements that our city has gone through since the late 60s, 70s. Does your organization or you in particular have gather information on how can I put this? Using public land that, I have two questions. The first one is using public land for the development of serious and good old-fashioned affordable housing, but where the land does not transfer to a nonprofit of any kind. It stays public. It is, the deed is, it's in the deed, nobody can go in there, and it's not a 30-year thing or for in perpetuity. So that public asset should, by some miracle, no longer be needed for affordable housing in the future, then gets used for other public services, for other. So that's one question. The second question is, we have seen in Sunset Park, and I speak to other people in other neighborhoods, that the purchase of small buildings by limited liability corporations, LLCs, that and also legally LLCs. And is there anything up in Albany to prevent the sale under the LLC legal, what do you call it? The protection of an LLC and the obscurity of an LLC or a hedge fund. And so that just drives that property even further away from affordability. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you so much for both of those questions. So the second one is a little easier to answer. So I'm gonna go with that one first. There is a bill in Albany right now, and I'm gonna put the bill in the chat right now. That's sponsored by Brad Hoylman in the Senate, and I think Emily Gallagher in the Assembly. That's called the LLC Transparency Act, and it would do exactly the kind of like address the problem that you've identified, where if you have an LLC, and it's very like I could form an LLC tomorrow, like costs like $50. It's super simple. But when a developer does it, it becomes much more difficult for tenants to not even like the question of organizing, like not even that, but like if you have problems with something in your apartment, to figure out who's the company, who's the person who owns the building. So yeah, there's a bill it's I think that it's doing pretty well, but at the same time, there's only 8 days left in the session in Albany, so it's kind of like an open question of if anything else is going to happen. But this bill would begin to address the problem. And I think earlier, Hennessy's put a link to this great organization called Just Fix NYC that sort of helps solve the problem and without kind of like legislative change. I'm gonna put it in the chat again. And it's called, they have this tool called Who Owns What? So even if your landlord is behind an LLC, you could put your address into this website and it will help you figure out who the landlord is and who the management company is. So they're, yeah, a great organization and they do really good work. For the first question, what you described is a really like, that would be awesome if there was a mechanism for the city to keep the public land that it has, develop affordable housing on it, and then if we somehow get rid of the affordable housing crisis, get out of it in some way in some distant future, to use the public land for something else. But I think what you identified is really important, where it's really important for the city to hold on to the assets that it has instead of selling them off or even giving them away to nonprofits. Like that makes a lot of sense to me. Unfortunately, the city has been, this has been the case since the 70s, where the political will within the agencies is just not there. Whenever I talk to anyone at HPD or at HCR, which is the state agency, they're just like terrified and don't want anything to do with holding onto title. The place where this comes up for me a lot is one of the campaigns that we're working on is to reform the way that the city deals with tax foreclosure, tax liens. Right now, the city sells them off to a private trust and kind of privatizes the act of foreclosure, giving the trust and all of these kind of like sketchy organizations the ability to foreclose on properties of people who sometimes they'll just like property. And what the coalition that we've been working on, their alternative has been to say to the city, don't do this because you're displacing low-income people, often low-income people of color, from dispossessing them of their assets, basically. Hold on to the title and let people either pay the property taxes off, or if it doesn't work for whatever reason, or if it's a multifamily building owned by a landlord, make it into a CLT or hold on to it.
Right.
It's just like, even the idea of holding onto the title for a little while is like, the agencies just don't want to do that. And it's the unfortunate reality of like the political will that we have in the city. It's just not there. I wish it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of my concerns, so for a very long time, is the power, and not always a benign power or a benign attitude of many nonprofits that actually build, become very strong and actually, I want to use the word wealthy in a, not in the regular sense, but they create power. And then, sorry, I'm in a place where somebody decided to get on a loudspeaker. I can't believe this, and I apologize. But anyway, and that is to cut that, what is it, the nonprofit industrial complex, which is very political. It impacts the votes. They're not supposed to, of course, we all know that, but they sway votes. They tell their tenants how to vote, not necessarily always to their benefit. And so that's where I was coming, to create a trust, like the state of New York had a very somewhat effective housing trust fund years ago. Mm-hmm. I believe it still exists, But unfortunately, and that was with the HDFCs, and I worked with that program. Unfortunately, the agreements only lasted 35 or 40 years, which is a wrinkle in time.
Yeah.
and so all that good work, which is a fantastic program, and now people sold those co-ops for some people have sold them for $1 million, and that was public monies that facilitated that housing. It should have never been. It should have all been in perpetuity. It should have been public land, and then the building, the legal ways of of making it happen. But like you say, the city and the state are best because they don't get power. You don't create power by protecting land. The power comes from selling it to the either highest bidder or the one who will give you the next campaign contribution or will get the votes for you. So anyway, I'm sure many people on this call know about that, but thank you. And thank you for your explanation. That was, I'm glad that for those who did not know about this, that now we have more information going around. Thank you.
Thank you. I have John Santori next.
Just two other quick questions. I think they're both related. These are broad again, but if you are disincentivizing in a policy basis, not you personally, but I just mean sort of across the board, if there is a suppression of affordable, of market rate housing, so you're getting less speculation, you're getting less big for-profit developments, does that mean that less tax revenue is going to come into New York City, and therefore the city will have less money for all of its needs, including subsidizing affordable units? That's one broad question. And the second question is, are the proposals that you've outlined tonight, are they likely to be opposed by homeowners in a community like Sunset Park because they will effectively cap or start to reduce the value of homes? And I don't say that to like try to draw lines in the sand, but I think everybody understands that there is, there are a lot of people who are renters. I think the majority of the community is renters. I'm a renter, for example. And then there are people who own their homes. And so I can imagine them saying, well, if we are trying to suppress the basically homes for sale on the market, then ultimately my investment is going to either not go up anymore or is gradually going to go down over time. So if there's anything you could say on that, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So on the first question, unfortunately, so right now, we live in a, like in a highly speculative market, especially the unregulated portion of it. Regulated housing is a little bit less speculative, but like realistically, it's been a huge sink for both very like international capital, but also local capital as well. Within the system where ostensibly we should be generating like a ton of revenue for all sorts of social programs because of programs like 421A, and because of the way that the property market is set up, the revenue that we should be getting is essentially getting privatized. So instead of using that 1.5 or 1.7 billion dollars a year that is foregone because of 421A for whether it's social services, whether it's like you want to like whatever the city wants to fund, whether it's affordable housing development, it's just it never makes it into the coffers in the first place. Within the kind of like the complexity of an actually functioning real estate market as opposed to like a really simple model that exists in an economics textbook, you end up in a place where because real estate and finance influence the way that politics works in the city, you never end up in the situation where you're just like, like we build a bunch of housing, it generates all of this revenue, and then we can fund nice things. Those nice things are not getting funded. I wish they were, but they're not. And in terms of your second question, so we outline a ton of different, we have 20 different policies that we outline. Some of them really don't influence the way that the homeownership market works at all. Some of them do and would eventually depress some of the overvalued property values, especially property tax reform. And that is absolutely something that would generate opposition from some homeowners, but not others. With something like with a neighborhood like Sunset Park, a lot of the single family homes actually end up paying way more taxes than much higher valued co-ops and condos in the city. So they would in the reforms that we propose that have to do with homeownership, they would actually like end up gaining, which is weird because you kind of, when you think about just like the opposition of tenant versus homeowner, when you get into the complexity of the way that the market works in the city, it gets much more messy. And there's often kind of like the influence of things like race and class ends up being more important than simply tenant versus homeowner.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no additional hands up, so I'll say last call. Going once. Going twice. Thank you very much for your presentation tonight, Oksana. Antoinette, are you still on? Can you still hear us?
Yeah, I'm on.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Oksana. Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for all of your questions. You're free to end the meeting. We'll follow up with you to get the slides and distribute that information to everyone who's attended today's meeting.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry for the interruption. I didn't want to go through the hand thing. The chat, the content of the chat, is that going to, how can one get that? Because I am unfortunately not able to, is that something that is going to be distributed?
Thank you, Maria. I've been saving all of that information as I'm taking notes, and we'll distribute that with the minutes.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone.
I do see an additional hand up if you want to. It is up to you, Oksana.
No, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I have Eduardo Jimenez next. Eduardo, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, hi. So yeah, thank you once again. I just want to sort of like circle back once again and then see if maybe any of the community board members, participants have any thoughts regarding today's presentation. Is there anything that they would like to share in regards to the contextualization of the information that was provided today, or would that be like something that can, I guess, later be reflected in a future, I guess, like mailing email thing?
Antoinette, would that be a new business discussion? So if people want to discuss a presentation and have that discussion be on the record, what would be the proper way to do that?
Thank you. I was a little confused by the question. So Eduardo, you're asking if the board would host a follow-up meeting to discuss the presentation?
Yeah, because I think that, you know, a lot of the information is being retained and is being discussed from community members, but then I'm interested on hearing the take from any of the community board committee members, and then see if they have any opinion, and then also how does that work? Yeah, because I think that John, you know, worded better than I did.
Okay, it sounds like you're both discussing two different things. So in terms of having a follow-up meeting, we can discuss that as a committee. But please note that there are committee members who are not board members. And through the housing committee, you know, whether you're a public member or a board member, as a committee, we're able to pass resolutions through this group. But it sounds, Eduardo, like you're asking more for board members to be on the record on their take of this meeting, and I'm not entirely sure how to go about that. I would need to get guidance from Julio, who's the community board chair, and from the district manager, Jeremy, if you're familiar with anything like this. But I'm certain, you know, I'll be honest, I'm certainly not. But and correct me if I'm wrong with how I'm understanding your question.
So I'm not quite sure I understand it. Board members are able to discuss this issue now. If they wish to discuss it further, board members could wish to share their opinions by making a motion of some sort. But I'm not sure what people are being asked to put on the record, or I'm not certain of that.
Yeah, I guess I would, I would like to see a more active community board committee, and I think that everything should be an open conversation. There's nothing that anyone is making any decisions moving forward. And so then that's only my only concern. I think that I've been hearing, many of the concerns and many of the insights from fellow community members, but I think it's important that we also hear I guess opinions or insights from community board members themselves, because in essence I think that they're representing the needs, and then also I think it's just it gets tricky. This is I don't really engage myself with community boards meetings like that, and so then I just I think it's just too I think this is really an open conversation. So I don't see why is it that community board members aren't participating in the conversation as well. Yeah, I mean, even just to add further insight on anything that they might might have heard or something like that.
Yeah, any board members that are on the call that would like to have the floor, just to share a bit more about your impressions from the meeting?
I have one board member and one committee member, Antoinette.
Let's go to Damien.
I have one board member, one committee member, one member of the public, former board member. So Damien, you are next.
Yes, hi. I definitely want to say thank you so much for this amazing presentation. I feel like it definitely pinned all of my questions and concerns regarding social housing. And I guess one topic I would like to add on to it would be, like, for instance, you talked about like community land banks with also a public bank. I don't know if you know about the public bank in Albany. It's called the Public Banking Act, which basically would, establish a public bank. So isn't that something that an organization like you guys kind of tackle and help promote?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for bringing that up. I completely forgot about that campaign. But yeah, absolutely. A public bank would be it would be awesome to have either a statewide institution, or to have, I think that the bill in Albany would be like an enabling act where localities could then establish their own public banks. So there could be like a New York City one, and like a Rochester and a Buffalo one. But yeah, using the deposits of the city, which, I mean, New York is an extremely wealthy place and has a lot of kind of like latent capital that's sitting in private banks. Using that money and the interest that it produces to support social housing protection would be hugely, like, it would be a game changer, basically. And there are other countries that are a little bit better about this than the US is. I'm thinking of like Germany and Austria, which have their own problems, but unless they're good, they have public banking institutions that essentially support their affordable housing production. So it's a model that works in other places and would be great for the city. So yeah, definitely thanks for bringing up that campaign.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Damien. John, I'm going to ask you to step aside for a moment, but I will call on you because we have not heard from Hennessy's yet today. So Hennessy's.
Oh, I'm sorry. So
Sorry.
I just wanted to chime in just to help move things along. Thank you, John and Hennessy's, for your questions. I think I think as a committee, we can talk a bit more about if we would like to have a follow-up meeting, just to discuss this further and any next steps that the committee would like to see from this meeting. But we do have a lengthy agenda, so if you have any follow-up questions about this, Genesis and John, I'll just ask that you email them to me, or you can email them directly over to the presenter. But I did want to move along with the agenda. And I know that, so I just wanted to say thank you so much again for the wonderful presentation and for all of the amazing questions from everyone. And again, I apologize for the tech issues I was having in the beginning of the meeting. I had like a little cute introduction for the presenter, but that went aside, so I apologize. But again, thank you so much. And I wanted to quickly give the floor to Genesis. She just sent me a message that she's going to get on the train soon. But as you know, Genesis was the former vice chair of this committee, and she was recently appointed to the Rent Guidelines Board. So Genesis wanted to talk a little bit about that and a vote that's happening later this month.
Genesis, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, my phone got frozen. Okay, give me 1 second. I lost my my pre-written notes. So yeah, thanks Antoinette for the opportunity. As a lot of you might know, the Rent Guideline Board is a board mandated to establish rent adjustments for approximately 1 million, I think over almost 2 million New Yorkers who live in buildings that are subject to the rent stabilization law in New York City. And the board holds a series of annual meetings that are public, and also hearings where we are supposed to consider research from staff, testimony from the owners, tenants, and advocacy groups, and also industry experts. So let me reduce everything I'm saying. So the Rent Guideline Board recently, we just had a preliminary vote on May 2nd. And that vote set the rent increases for, like I said, almost 2 million New Yorkers, right, who live in rent stabilized apartments. And the vote was to increase the rent 2 to 4% for 1 year lease renewals, and 4 to 7% to people who renew their lease for 2 years, which is, in my opinion, extremely high. I am a tenant rep on the board. I am one of 2 tenant reps. There are 2 owner representatives and also 4 members of the public. So what I gotta say is that the board is not necessarily pro-tenant. Most of the data presented by staff is pro-landlord and very biased. So it is super, super important that tenants, especially people from this community, show up at the hearings. There is a hearing coming up on Monday, June 5th, in the Bronx. It's going to be in the Bronx at 6. Let me get the address. I'll give you the address. Sorry, I got a little nervous because I got to get on the train very soon. Hold on, I'm going to put the information on the chat right now so that you can join the hearings. You can sign up to participate on the hearings ahead of time and testify. So again, the next hearing is going to be in the Bronx, followed by another hearing in Queens, and then we're going to have a hearing in Brooklyn on June 13. Let me see. June 15. June 15 is going to be the hearing in Brooklyn, and it's going to be held in downtown St. Francis College, 179 Livingston Street, from 5 to 8 p.m. So super, super important that you show up and testify. The last vote is going to be on June 21st. So something else that you can do as a tenant, as a member of this community, is also to to send a letter to the mayor, right? Because we know the share, although the Rhode Island Board is supposed to be, we are supposed to be completely independent. The share of the board serves at the, at the favor of the mayor. And we know that this mayor is pro real estate. He's getting a lot of money from that industry into his political campaign. He already raised a bunch of money, and you can follow the money. You can follow the money, right? So that means there's a possibility that there's some sort of influence. I guess I'm not, and I don't think I'm supposed to say that in public, but it is what it is, right? So write to the mayor, make sure that he knows that 7% is too high, even 5% is too high. That's what happened last year. And right now we have, since last year, almost 5,000 evictions, 4,400 evictions pending. 404,000 evictions. So a lot of evictions happening. So if we increase the rent way more, it's gonna get worse. I'll stop here. Ask me questions. I'll be better at answering your questions.
We'll take a few questions on this. Does anyone have their hand raised? I see one hand. John?
Hi, Hennessy. Do landlords need to raise rents to pay for property improvements and to make up for money they lost during COVID? I feel like that's the common argument that we hear and the common reason that's given for raising rents. What do you think about that?
I mean, the NOI, which is the net operating income, that's in profit after they pay their operating costs, keeps increasing. It has increased about 40% in the last 33 years. So all the increases, I mean, the Rhode Island Board is not mandated to increase the rent. The Rhode Island Board is mandated to make adjustments. Ever since the Rhode Island Board became a board, the rent has increased, except for the years during the de Blasio administration, when the rent got frozen for, I think, 2 consecutive years, and then very low increases for one something, and then 2.5, something like that. That never happened before. So 40% increase in profit for landlords for the last 33 years since 1990. So right now, the landlords saw a decrease. I mean, based on the data that I review, I put a YouTube channel so you can look here, so you can listen to all the hearings that happened and the meetings where the data is being discussed. Also, you can access the data provided by the RGB staff, so you can analyze yourself. But what I understand after reading is that even though landlords, owners had I guess a deficit or a decrease in profit during 2020 and maybe part of 2021, that money was recovered. They received 2.3 billion, if I'm not mistaken, from rental assistance, like ERAP, for example. So there was really no loss if you think about it. All that money has been recovered. Also, the industry, the people who invest in rent stabilized property have, let me phrase this different. The buying of rent stabilized buildings has increased 14%. If the industry was so bad, people would not be investing in such industry. So there's no evidence that landlords have lost to the extent that they claim, right? Also, something else we noticed by data presented is that most owners own multiple buildings. Most of them are predatory equity owners. So they buy, they sell in 5 years. So tenants continue living, most people who live in rent stabilized apartments continue living in very distressed conditions. Apartments are not being repaired at the rate that they should. You see that, in Sunset Park. So it's just rent stabilization right now is just an easy profit making market. So that's just my stand, you know. I'm a tenant rep, not an owner representative. But you can check the data on the website and analyze it. Any other questions?
Thank you, Hannah. I have one question, and I'm sorry if this is a little off topic, but was wondering if you would be able just to talk a little bit about the lack of attorneys and that the effect of that on right to counsel and ways that this committee can help support tenant advocates that are looking for more support with RTC.
Sorry. So I am not involved with the right to counsel campaign, but what we know is that there's no money, right? And all the legal service providers are over capacity. So that means that many tenants are being forced to have hearings in the housing court without legal representation. And again, the right to counsel law is to make sure that people that are under the 200% poverty level can get legal representation. So again, most of those people are not getting help, and I think I think it's on the governor. I don't think she allocated any money for this, and I think the mayor also has power to put money on this, and that's not where their money is going. So I don't have much to say about the campaign, but sorry, the budget situation and the money, but people should get involved with the Right to Counsel Coalition. There are some actions now, and I know the Right to Counsel is also trying to pass Right to Counsel at the state level. It's very likely not going to pass during this session, but there is a big chance that it passes next session. I do think our Senator Gunardis is very supportive of that bill. I think Marcela supports it. Not sure exactly what she stands on it, but I wouldn't see her opposing it. And again, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about the city situation, but we know. I think we know more or less what the mayor stands on this. I mean, he cut a lot of funding to public services and put the money on other agencies that don't necessarily need it. So I'll put a link to the Right to Counsel campaign, the Right to Counsel Coalition, on the chat. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I don't see any other questions. All right. And thank you so much for all the links that you sent. Oh, we have a question from Gambino. If you can unmute your line.
Yes, good afternoon, guys. So I'm not a committee member for the housing committee, but I do want to state something that might be useful for us to do as a board. Just coming out of the committee, I was just wondering is it possible we can actually take some action and maybe hash up a letter of disapproval for increases in rent, stabilized apartments, and is that a possibility that could come out from the committee? And also that we are approving a 0% increase in any type of rent increases. So is that something that could be drafted in the committee and sent to the full board?
Yeah, we can. So Jeremy, if you can help with the correct protocol, but what I'm hearing is that a resolution is looking to be passed, and do we need someone to second it?
So what I'm hearing is Gabino is presenting a resolution. You are correct. You would need a second, and then there would be a vote of the committee members if it is seconded.
Okay, I'm happy to second.
I second it as well.
So Gabino, the idea would be to write a letter to the rent guidelines board, or to who?
Yes, so it would be to the rent guideline boards and maybe to our local representative, Alexa Aviles, so she could send that out to the appropriate authorities for the housing authority, whoever that may be.
Okay.
I believe we can send it directly to the city. That's correct, Jeremy? And also address it to city council?
I believe they are having a public hearing, so we could provide testimony to that.
Yes.
I will point out, though, that I believe, and Hennessy's correct me if I'm wrong, the meeting, the final vote on this is June 21st.
Yes.
Our board meeting is June 21st, so that's when we will be voting on it.
Yeah, but there is a hearing on June 13, the Brooklyn hearing. I don't know if the testimony.
Right, but our full board would not have a chance to vote on it by then. However, our committee could vote on it.
Got it.
We wouldn't be able to claim it's the board's position. We could claim it's the committee's position.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you for confirming. So we can send a letter on behalf of the committee, not of the full board.
What we would say is pending full board vote on the 21st.
Okay.
So Antoinette, at this point, you would normally say, is there any discussion on the motion?
Any discussion from anyone? Raise your hand.
There's a hand up from Gabino.
Okay, yes. So just thank you for that information. So to be clear, this letter would state that we are in disapproval of an increase, any type of increase in rent. And then we approve of a 0% increase specifically, so they understand what our community needs here. And every other board, I believe, should be able to do this as well. Maybe we can communicate with other boards neighboring our districts besides this letter.
Gabino, until that is a policy of our full board, it would not be up to our board to do that. Nothing stops individuals from reaching out to others.
That's a copy. Thank you.
Hey, a quick question, I guess to Jeremy and to Antoinette. Sorry, Antoinette. Do we get a copy? Can we get a copy of this letter as well? Just because you did mention that we can then kind of either share this letter amongst other or local organizations, or even just amongst our local community people.
So Antoinette, may I field that one?
Of course.
So I'm going to tease you a moment, Alberto, because you were out of order with that question. Please use the raise hand function. Antoinette is technically supposed to call on everybody. However, the answer to your question is, of course, all of our communication, our letters are public documents and can be requested. And if the chair requests it, we could share it with all the committee members.
Thanks for
Yeah,
that.
and once we have the new website up, you know, all of these documents, they should be posted so that everyone can see them timely. But yeah, once we have the wording, we'll be sure to circulate it with everyone.
That was my follow-up question. Thanks, Antoinette. Sorry about that.
And just to confirm, the letter would go to the mayor's office?
I believe
it's more of a discussion question. Yeah.
Yes, I believe it should go to the mayor and the rent stabilizing board. I forgot the actual name for that, but the rent guidelines board.
Got it. Okay. Does anybody oppose? Could we do this unanimously, or do we do a roll call? I'm not entirely sure.
So Antoinette, if I could share what the wording is for that?
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy.
So you would say, if anybody opposes unanimous consent, please speak up or raise your hand, and we will do this by roll call. Without objection, it would be considered unanimous consent.
Okay, got it. Does anyone oppose? Raise your hand.
Not even opposing the motion itself, just opposing unanimous consent and calling for a roll call vote. Antoinette, I see no hands and nobody saying they oppose this.
Okay, so it'll pass unanimously.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, for thinking of that resolution. Really, really appreciate that. I see Genesis left. Thank you so much, Genesis, for helping to keep us in the loop on the rent guidelines board. Appreciate you taking a chance to speak. Okay. Now, let me see here. It's 8:10. I did want to dedicate the rest of the meeting to some new business items that committee member John Santori has sent over. Let me see if I will have any luck sharing my screen. One moment. Hopefully you all can.
We see it, Antoinette.
Okay, perfect. All right. So John Santori sent along these new business items. I would like for this part of the meeting to be, freestyle conversation with everyone. So feel free to, raise your hand and we can talk about this further. So this was supposed to be our May meeting, but because of scheduling, we had to move it to June 1st. So technically we can have another meeting in June to talk about, either one of these topics, or if anyone else has another item that they'd like to quickly add. I see Alberto does. Alberto, can you just drop it in the chat? And we'll make sure to get to it. If anyone else has something that they'd like to bring up for discussion, please drop it in the chat. And then what we have also instituted within the Housing Committee is holding a meeting, is working to hold a meeting at the beginning of the term. So this would happen in the fall, where we would, as a committee, hash out what our future agenda and future meetings would be. So we have a list of items here that John Santori has proposed. And see, John has his hand up. John, did you want to go through these, or did you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure. So thanks a lot, Antoinette. I don't want to hold people for a long period of time with this stuff. I think, these are all things that I believe in, but I think I'd be happy to talk about any individual ones, but I also just want to say in general, and this is D and F. I really want to encourage this committee to share information and to encourage ongoing fluid conversation between committee members in between meetings, so that people are sharing ideas, getting information out there, and working together to set up meetings, to set up agendas, to discuss their ideas. And I think if we do that, the committee will have more engagement and more action, and will be able to just do a lot more. So again, I'm happy if anybody is interested in any of these things. I'm happy to discuss them now. But if there's not enough time now, I would highlight D and F. So D is asking for us to be clear to create three things: a publicly accessible Google Drive folder for all committee documents, a shared committee document where we can all put ideas and edit the document so that we can share ideas, and then also an email list so that all members, an opt-in email list so that people can email each other and share ideas that way. These are all things that can be done for free using the board's Google account. And then also by doing that, we could also discuss future meeting dates and agendas and figure out how often we want to meet. And I just want to say one more thing quickly, which is that I think this is important, and this is not to blame anybody or judge anyone. I understand that it's always difficult to do volunteer work. But I want to point out that, and this gets back to something Jesus said before, so there are 6 board members on this committee. So first of all, I would like to flag that. I would encourage this committee to get more people, try to get more board members on the housing committee, because 6 is not a lot in my opinion. But of those 6 tonight, we have 2 present, and we have 4 board members who are not present. And at the last meeting, we also didn't have a quorum. So after the CLT presentation in April, we were unable to take any action. So I think it's really crucial for us to be communicating and talking and to be reaching out to everybody to figure out where they're at, what they believe, especially when, you know, like a presentation like tonight. I mean, I think this is a fascinating presentation, but this presentation has an overall view of how to view the world and how to view things like housing. And I think we as a group of people who may or may not know each other, I know some members of this committee, I've never met a whole bunch of others. I know Damien, for example, I see him on this call. I've met him, I've talked to him, but there are a whole bunch of people who I've never met at all. I don't know who they are, where they live, what they believe, and they don't know anything about me. I think we have to talk to each other to find out whether we're actually in agreement on things like, for example, is market rate housing good for this community? You know, yes or no? How many people have an opinion on that? If we're not talking to each other and trying to get like first principles for what we believe, then it's going to be hard for us to plan agendas and plan meetings and also take any action together. So anything that can encourage that, I think the simple tools that again are free. I'm unaware of any board bylaws that would be violated by creating these things. And F, you know, using those tools for us to set agendas and meeting dates, I just think that that would be super helpful. So I just want to put that out there as an overall point. And then if anybody wants to talk about anything on this list, I see that we also have, as Antoinette said, Alberto has a suggestion. So, you know, we'd love to chat about anything else people have now, but the more work we can do in between meetings, the more ready we are to take action at meetings.
Thank you, John. Do any committee members would like to comment on the points John just made? Damien?
Yes, thank you. I 100% agree with John. I feel like establishing a good community network with my peers, because I'm not gonna lie, I haven't even met some of my peers as of yet, and we have multiple meetings, and it would be glad to like see who I'm working with, to see who's in the committee as well, and something that we could like, you know, help plan future meetings so it could be well organized. So I feel like if we're better communicated, if we're all like having our interests aligned with together, I feel like a lot more projects and a lot more work can definitely get done as long as we come together as a community board and like you know, try to get stuff done with one another and try to like include more meetings. Because I went to a meeting regarding the library and it was back in the community board, it was like this month, about the location, about the community, the location that they're moving the library to the other location and what they want to do with that space alone. And it was like the people who presented noticed that when they were doing research with the community, that the community doesn't even have a connection with our community board. And I feel like one of those reasons is also the lack of communications among this board to, you know, hold effective meetings, to have more meetings forward on. And it's just like calling for like the whole board to come together. And I feel like if we're all together, we could definitely be more effective in the future and passing, you know, more legislation. More resolutions to get through forward. And yeah, and I definitely also want to talk about topic A if, you know, people come. But yeah.
Thank you, Damien. Alberto?
Hey, everybody. So I mean, I guess first, you know, I'd like to definitely, you know, thanks, John, for putting all of this together. I think this is definitely something that a lot of us who have been on this committee feel and agree with 110%. I think that we are absolutely getting a lot better. I just checked the Instagram and we are getting a lot better at posting things on Instagram. So whoever's doing that, thank you so much. So we are doing some headway on reaching out to our community in terms of social media, and also to Damien's point. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to kind of attend that meeting, but I did hear some feedback from people who were there, and it does also seem a lot of it of what Damien said made sense. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that yes, we do need to increase the amount of board members on this committee. I think, reached out, and Jeremy and Antoinette was very helpful with my question in terms of potentially being a co-chair on the committee. I didn't hear anything potentially back, but I'm sure that's coming through soon. But I know that they are having in order to be a new board member, I think that's sometime in January. Jeremy or someone could kind of clarify that if you'd like to. I encourage everyone who wants to put their hat in the ring to apply. And I think that even if we just have an overwhelming amount of people who want to jump on this board to do so, I think that will also put a lot of pressure to whoever makes these rules in terms of how many board members can be on a committee. I don't know when these bylaws were created. I think I had a copy of them. They looked very dated, and correct me if that's, I think I got a Xerox copy of it. If we need to update these bylaws to be more current with what's currently going on in our community, I think with us as a committee or as a board really need to kind of push that ball forward so that we can kind of really connect with our community a lot better.
Thank you, Alberto. I know for new members, they were, the bylaws were disseminated to them. I'm not sure if that same finalized version was circulated to board members, but I can follow up and make sure that everyone within the housing committee has the most updated version that we have of that.
Antoinette, the bylaws were voted on about a year ago. Every board member should have the most recent copy, including our 14 new members. Alberto, it is the borough president that controls the appointments for community boards. I'm assuming that the application process is going to start in January, but in truth, that is up to the borough president. So they will let us know later in the year when that's happening.
Jeremy, would you happen to know if vice chair positions can be held by non-board members? We followed up with Julio.
The district managers do not interpret the bylaws. The bylaws say, I believe the board chair people can be have to be board members. I assume, but again, I do not interpret the bylaws that it would be the same thing since vice chairs can become chairs. It is up to the chairperson, Julio, to interpret the bylaws.
Okay, thank you. So Alberto will send a follow-up email to Julio.
Just one quick thing. And I'm sorry, I know there's other hands up, but just one more quick thing. I did, so the new bylaws were voted recently, I think a year ago, but when they were voted, were the bylaws changed in any way, or were they just, here's the bylaws again, we need to vote on them, and then we'll push them through? Were new laws created? Were there anything?
It was quite an extensive change. Julio was the chair of the bylaws committee. I would invite you to speak to him about the breadth of the changes within the bylaws.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. I do have his contact info. I'll be sure to reach out to him. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And just to move things along, Elise, if you'll be the last to comment on this topic, and then I just wanted to move this along to see if we can do an unofficial vote to see if folks are interested in having another meeting before the end of the month. But before we get to that, Elise, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm wholeheartedly in support of these suggestions. So I think it begs a question about what the role of this board is. Like, do we want to be an active, engaged kind of force in our community? And if that's true, we should adopt some of these. So then I also, I think that we should, I'm very interested in point C on this slide as well, but I'm entirely in support of this. So that's it.
Antoinette, may I make a motion?
Sure.
So I would like to motion that, if I'm just going to read point D. I motion that the committee should send a letter to the CB7 Executive Committee and ask them to approve the creation of an opt-in Google group for the committee, which is an email group, a publicly accessible Google Drive folder for committee documents, and a shared committee document, aka Google document, for planning purposes. And I feel like if we have these tools, and I'm asking it to be sent to the executive committee just to make sure that there's no objection and there's no violation of any bylaws. And I think if we have these tools, we can then engage in many further conversations that could talk about lots of stuff.
Right. Thank you, John. So I hear you on that. So a couple of points. For the Google group, and we can definitely have a shared document, Google document for planning purposes. I know that's something that you help to implement within the Economic and Waterfront Committee. For the Google Drive, from my understanding, Jeremy is working to have the website updated so that all of the minutes and all of the meeting information can be accessed by everyone within the public, not only committee members. But we don't have, I'm sorry if I'm wrong, Jeremy, but do we have a timeline for when that'll be implemented?
It's June 1st. I promise June. I intend to keep June.
Okay, and then we would be able to, like, for example, for the minutes from today's meeting, that would be made accessible on the public website?
So the minutes from this evening would be attached to the September 2023 minutes for the full board, because the committee reports go with the board meeting minutes. So that will be available attached to that part of the public document.
Okay. Would there be an opportunity to have a conversation about how committees can manage the information that's posted on the website?
There are limited numbers of people who are allowed to post on the website. Certainly you could direct the folks, typically the staff, who are allowed to make changes to the website. So I think that's not the committee itself, but the committee could direct the people who make the changes to the website.
Okay. So who can we speak to just to have more clarity on how we can make sure that items are posted in a timely fashion onto the website?
You were talking to the person.
Julio? Okay.
So the staff, once we move to the new website, the staff will be able to make changes ourselves. We no longer have to go to what's now OTI to make any changes to the website.
Okay, so we would
I would also suggest, since we should be launching in June, that people look at the website over the summer and make suggestions on other changes, whatever format changes or additional information that people may think is necessary for us to do. We will have a flexibility to make changes to the website itself since we're now using WordPress, that we could potentially even add additional pages and such.
Okay, so if this committee worked with you to have on those updates, would that be something that would be helpful to you? Just to make sure, because I don't want to wait until September to have these.
No. What I'm saying is look at what we're providing when the new website comes out. And if you have suggestions over the summer prior to September, feel free to keep an open dialogue with us. We will work with OTI to make that happen.
Okay, and just one additional follow-up question. In June, the website will be made public, or will it be in the development phase?
No. We are in development right now. I need to get approval from OTI that what we are doing is falls within the Americans with Disabilities Act, I believe. But beyond that, we should be public for everybody.
Okay, and in the interim, can we create a public Google Drive just to post information from today's meeting so that can be accessible to the public?
So there is nothing that prevents individuals from doing that, even board members from doing that. I cannot give, if there's anything that allows people to access board members' private information, their email addresses, I cannot do that through the board.
Okay, so it sounds like, so just for the committee, it sounds
Folks,
like
if you are not speaking right now, please mute yourself.
Sorry, so it sounds like we will be able to create a Google Drive to post this information, but it's not really clear where we can post that. So it sounds like it will be accessible to folks who are on the housing committee.
So what you were asking me is a legal question that should go to somebody who's familiar with open meetings law, because you're talking about discussing public information potentially in a private group. And I'm not equipped to answer that information, that question.
Jeremy, I'm sorry. What I'm asking is for Google Drive. So Google Drive is just a vehicle where documents can be posted.
That you would share to individuals without being able to contact others within that group. Am I correct on that?
There's no group. It would just be, it's just a Google Drive where different documents can be posted.
Where people could access it and they wouldn't be able to contact folks.
Correct.
I believe that would be legal. I would check with the borough president's legal counsel, but I believe that would be legal.
I believe I've seen it implemented with other community boards.
Yeah,
so I think.
Again, I believe it would be legal.
Okay.
This stop is 5th Avenue and 18th Street. So please exit through the rear door.
Folks, if you are not speaking right now, please mute yourself.
Okay, I think that was Maria. I muted her line. Alberto, you wanted to chime in?
Sorry, actually, you know what, John, you can go first.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Albert. I just want to clarify this point because I'm not trying to confuse anything. Can CB7 just create a document for planning purposes using its Google account and then share that with whoever is appropriate to share it with, for example, the members of the committee and then any board members who want to be added to that. And then a link on that could be to the Google Drive where information is posted. And we could also put that publicly if there's some way to post it publicly. We could make any of this public. I mean, the link to the shared document could be public. The link to the drive could be public. I don't know what can be posted online, but none of this would show email addresses or anything. It would just be a repository for information. It would also, the document, which could also be public, would allow committee members and board members to share ideas and post ideas about what we should be doing as a committee. So is there any problem with just creating those things and then starting to put information in them?
As you described it, I don't see a problem with that, John.
Okay, and then in terms of the email, in terms of the email list, what I'm suggesting is an opt-in email list So if members of this committee want to be added to the email list, or members of the board want to be added to the email list, they would just be added to the Google group. And then anybody can email each other within that group. There are ways to hide email addresses, but again, because it would be opt-in, people would be okay with sharing their email address to other members of the group.
As long as it's an opt-in and not roach for all committee members, I think that would be fine.
Okay, okay, well, I'm asking.
It would have to be a public document because our work needs to be in public. We're not supposed to be able to work behind closed doors. So as long as that's available to the entire public, I think that's fine.
So I'm sorry, Alberta, I know you have your hand up and Cynthia has her hand up, but I just need to clarify this because I understand the spirit of that, but to me, that would mean that nobody can email each other privately. I mean, I email Antoinette, I email board members all the time.
To each other. You just would
Right.
be able to do it through the board. Remember, we're a government agency. I can't give out anybody's email address. You're perfectly welcome to exchange email addresses with each other and speak to each other outside of this.
So you're saying the board cannot use its resources, or for example, its Google account to create a non-public email list. It cannot do that.
Correct. It would need to be public.
But doesn't the board have its own email list for members of the board to like when information is sent out to members of the board? Isn't that a non-public email list?
No, it's not organized in that way.
The information is sent out to the public.
Okay, so we cannot have a board sponsored email list that's not accessible to the public.
It needs to be accessible to the public.
Okay, so then if
we are sharing information, that needs to be accessible to the public.
Okay, so if we create a Google document, does that document also have to be accessible to the public?
If we create a Google document, I'm assuming that's something that we could post to our website.
Yes.
So that would be available to the public.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'm going to ask for the creation of the Google document and the Drive folder, and then I would ask this committee to do its own email list, some sort of opt-in email. I mean, I started one a month ago, but there's no board members on it. It's all just like some associated people. Anyway, I'm sorry I'm talking so much. I'm just trying to clarify what's possible here, because we can't. I feel like we can't afford to not talk to each other in between meetings. Like, we've got to be communicating with each other.
John. Sorry, I just want to chime in really quickly. So for your first point, if you're interested in helping to draft a Google document for planning purposes, it would be really appreciated. For your second point, for the creation of the Google group, something like that does not exist for any committee currently. And then just to be very transparent, even amongst board members, there is no mechanism for us to really freely communicate with each other. If we do want to send out an email, that would go through the board, and then the board would go ahead and circulate that information. I have reached out to the executive committee looking for guidance on how to organize something like a Google group, just because that would have, it can grow and have a large number of folks from the public. So, I appreciate you all going out and creating something unofficial and working to organize, but if it's opt-in, in order for me as chair to feel comfortable in opting into a group like that, I would need to have I would need to have clarity from the executive committee on how to work and sort of like finagle those lines, because if something does come through that, does it then become, as chair, what responsibility do I hold because I was part of that group? So I really am looking for guidance from the executive committee on how to move forward with that. And again, it's not something that exists for other committees. So that's just my point. And if anybody, and I really appreciate you taking the initiative to start that. Me personally, I am not 100% comfortable in joining that group. If I was not the chair, I would feel comfortable, but because of the position I'm in and the lack of guidance I've received, that's why I haven't joined that group. So I just want to be transparent in that end. And then Cynthia and Alberto.
Antoinette, if I may just share and agree with that point. Remember, we're a government agency. We have certain hoops that we have to jump through in order to be able to do certain things, including communication. So it makes it a little more difficult when you work through us because we do have a bureaucracy and certain laws. For example, we have the public information law where we're not allowed, for example, to give out addresses. Other entities are not beholden to the same bureaucracy that a government agency is. Sorry, Antoinette. I know you were calling on other folks.
Oh, no, thank you, Jeremy. Cynthia and then Alberto.
Antoinette, I just wanted to thank you so very much for the work that you're doing with this committee. As a former housing chair committee in CB7 and as a developer for low and very low income housing for the past almost 40 years, you know, the work to keep people in their homes, you know, especially, you know, people like myself. I am a renter and I'm a senior citizen, and you know, all of the work that you've done since you've been the chair, I have to commend you for it. It's you know, I probably was the chair maybe more than 15 years ago. So you know, things change over time, but housing insecurity is something that, you know, it hasn't abated. It hasn't abated at all. And you know, the rent guidelines board and stuff like that, of course, they're trying to, you know, save landlords more than they are trying to save the people. I just want to commend you on all of the work that you're doing. And I am really, really dismayed right now to know that you have so, how should I say, so little people on your committee. Not that I have any more on my health committee, you know, don't get me wrong, but yes, the community board, you know, they do great work, but the committees are the ones that really do the work. And unless, you know, like I've been on the community board for more than 30 years. So, you know, I'm in the beginning, I was just like put on these committees. Some of them, of course, I selected, but, you know, it raises the question that when we're dealing with critical situations like housing insecurity and everything, that people on the board don't come on to the committees to give their input. Now, myself, I've tried today, of course, I chimed in late because, of course, my husband's in a nursing home, but I do want you to know that you have my full support because I see the work that you're doing. I see the important things that you are trying to bring to the public. And, you know, of course, I'm not a committee member, but you have my full support. I just want you to know, no, I just want you to know that it's this housing situation, it's a huge challenge because we're dealing with not only the housed, but the unhoused. And our community is a primary target for people to just dump every problem that they have on us. And that's very challenging. That's very challenging. We haven't had to deal with that. You know, when I was the chair of the housing committee, we had no homeless shelters at that time. But at this point, it's just becoming untenable. We can't, you know, there's so much going on that we need to be at the forefront of protecting, you know, our people, our seniors, our unhoused people, our tripled and quadrupled up housing people, you know, and anything that I can do to help with that, you know, with that goal, I'm always here for you. I just want you to know that it's a very, very, it's probably the most challenging situation that we have going on in our community. And as the chair, I really commend you, and I want to thank you so very much.
Thank you. So yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Honestly, I didn't realize that we had so little board members, official board members on this committee. And also, you know, just speaking very candidly, part of the frustration is that a lot of these topics, that, you know, are proposed here for new business, yes, they are housing, but then they also have to do with land use, right? So they are topics that do encompass multiple committees. So it would be good to have these conversations jointly. But yeah, this is something that I'm going to bring up at our next board meeting. I am going to raise a call to have more board member support. We do have a number of new board members. Hopefully they'll be interested in joining and becoming active within this committee. I'm also going to, again, pitch for clarity on, you know, how to really engage and work with committee members, given the, and looking for support in how to engage and have these active conversations. And also look for guidance on, you know, the appointment of vice chairs and also other chair positions. So currently there's a vacancy of at least 3 or 4 other committee positions, such as the land use committee. And I think that if we work to tackle a lot of the issues that, you know, we see here that John has mentioned up collaboratively with other committees, it will be a good way to pull in more board member support, you know, to do more of this work. But I think also something that needs to be clear is, you know, what is the board's role in pushing these? You know, are we more informational and here as a resource to the community to hold informational so that, you know, folks that are on the ground doing this organizing work can use this information, you know, as tools to move forward with? Or is the expectation for this committee to be more of an organizing body and out there doing the work? And that's something that, you know, if it's the latter, then I'm going to need more support from the executive committee and how to organize that. So I'm just being, you know, very honest. Jeremy and then Alberto.
So I just wanted to remind folks, because there are questions about the number of people on committees. This annually is typically the low point for committee membership because 28% of our board members were appointed just about a month ago. So that means we lost somewhere in the vicinity of 28% of our board members. That does not hit all committees equally. But I do know our chairperson is going to be meeting with some of the other members of the executive committee to discuss new appointments to including our new board members to committees over the next month or so. So I think we will be seeing new appointments. I would just also like to say to our new board members, because only about 50% of them so far have sent in their committee request sheets. If you have not done so, please submit your committee request sheets so that these folks from the executive committee can make those determinations. And also, if you are not a new appointee and you want to be a member of a committee you're not currently on or leave a committee you're currently on, please let us know that as well.
Great, thank you, Jeremy, for clarifying. And then Alberto, your hand was raised.
Hey, sorry about that. What was I saying? Oh, can we also, speaking of improving our communication and our connection, our, connecting more with our community, I'm a big fan of mimicking success, especially since if I don't know something, I always look towards someone who does what I want to do and does it good and then just see what they do. That being said, is there a way to somehow invite someone from another community board that are just rock stars at connecting with their community, just so that it kind of gives us a little bit more insight on how they navigate these loopholes that we're having challenges with, how they are connecting with their communities and getting their communities more involved on these calls. Is there some way that we can invite someone from another board, like I don't know, I don't even know. I think Community Board 6, which is right above us, they seem to be doing a really, really good job. And I just kind of want to just present that and see what everyone's thoughts are on that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point. I think one of the challenges that I personally face is that the housing committee has been thrown a number of topics that really range. So we overlap with environmental issues, we overlap with land use issues, with shelters, with homelessness. We have been really hit with a number of different topics. So it's been really difficult to organize around one item, you know what I mean? Because there's just so many different things going on. I think, if we are looking for, basically what I'm trying to say is that we can definitely work and reach out to other boards to see how they're working to navigate things, but I would be hesitant to also take that on, because then it would mean putting down one of these very important items of discussion, so I think it's a balancing act. I think these are things that we're going to need to really speak and engage with our executive committee, and really get guidance from leadership about how to move forward. Because John, he flagged right here. He's gonna bring this up. Wanted to share with you all, and thank you, John, for bringing this up. But this is one of the developments, and I don't have much information about the developer, but it looks like this may or may not be the proposed building for this vacant lot on 49th Street and 4th Avenue. So, I mean, there's a lot going on in this committee. In this community. I agree with you all. I think, there's a lot going on. So I think we just need to really work and see like where we want to prioritize, how we want to use this committee to move forward in making Sunset Park more affordable for folks, preserving affordability that we do have. But this committee really does get hit with a number of different topics. And I think one thing that I have advocated for is, really splitting this up, having the ad hoc homelessness committee be reinstated so that they can take that on. There are a number of shelters that have been introduced into the community. But yeah, I think a lot has been thrown on this committee, and it would be helpful just to have more guidance. But that's where I'm at with that.
Thanks, Antoinette. I appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah, so I honestly, I don't want to end this meeting without, really just speaking candidly with everyone about how we should move forward. Jeremy, one last question, I'm sorry. For the summer, do committees are they banned from meeting, or would we be able to still hold unofficial meetings during the summer?
You could hold official meetings during the summer. There's nothing that prevents committees from meeting. Just the full board doesn't meet in July and August. Any other committee
Okay.
can meet as they see fit.
Okay, perfect. So I know it's close to 9. John, I'm gonna ask if you can help to create that Google document that we can share with the committee. And then for folks that are committee members, whether you're public members or board members, I'll put together like a doodle poll, and what we can do is just vote on, we can look at these proposed business items, and then there were a number of other items that we had. I don't have it with me right now, but I'll include it, and it'll be an exhaustive list of items that we have all brought forward. Alberto also had chimed in and brought in a new discussion item, so I'll include that as well. If anyone else has an item for discussion that they would like to include, or if they can think of something later on, please send it over to Jeremy or to the community board office, and then we'll make sure to get it included. And then let's just take it from there. I'm happy to continue meeting over the summer and working to tackle and have informationals on any of these items. Okay, and then very quickly, because I want to end by 9, Maria and then Alberto.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have been involved in past years in outreach from one community board to another, and it is a delicate act. It is best, when I've seen it work best, is when before inviting anyone, you put the word out to people who you trust in other communities, in other community boards, people who are civic minded, who attend community board meetings, and do a little sort of light survey, like how does your community board work? Have there been changes? Before actually kind of more seriously reach out, because and maybe sort of target communities that are having the same issues we're having. So they have been and continue to go through similar situations, whether they're being dumped with homeless shelters, whether there is a lot of limited equity, not limited, who's buying, who's how much money is coming into the neighborhood very quickly, where's the money coming from? So there are similar things going on, and how that community board has evolved to discuss, to amplify the conversation, to become, for the activity to become more meaningful, and rather than, because community boards range the gamut. They range the gamut.
Thank you, Maria. And I think that's something that we'll have to talk about. That's something this committee in particular has the capacity to take on. That sounds like what we're looking to develop is a community board survey. Maybe we can develop something like that for, reach out to other housing committee groups throughout the city. But again, it really depends, like how the housing committees are organized throughout the cities. A lot of them are organized and they work in conjunction with other committees. So it can fluctuate, but if that's something that we can see if we have the capacity to move forward with that, or if maybe another committee would be willing to take that on, but I can definitely add that on to the list of agenda items, and then we can all vote on it. But thank you so much. And then Damien, I'm gonna take your comment last. Eduardo, I'm sorry. If you want to leave your comment in the chat, Damien, you'll be our last comment for the night.
All right, perfect. It would just be real quick. I just wanted to know if like these proposed agenda items will be something that we could talk about for the next meeting if we are going to have one for the next month or this month. But yeah.
Yeah, so so John is going to help develop a shared document similar to one that he developed for another committee. So it'll have all of these items, and then I'll create a link to a poll so that we can all go ahead and we can vote on it to see which topics. I'm happy to hold these meetings during the summer. A lot of committees don't meet over the summer, but we can certainly, I mean, there's a lot of pressing issues going on in this community. I'm happy to move forward with holding meetings, you know, this month, again, another meeting this month in July and August. All right, thank you all. Sorry this meeting went 2.5 hours, but it was really great. Again, appreciate you all. Give me a little bit to get all of these notes together. Today's Thursday. I hope to get it to you by the beginning of next week, so early next week. And then I'll be in touch with John about that document to have it circulated to everyone. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.